Let us.
And just let me tell you that if Noor doesn't put his picture on immediately, that's okay. He'll put it on eventually.
Okay. What was the name of the town one more time in
Where
Iran?
Noor lives?
No, where your wife Ayala is from.
Oh, Yazd.
Yeah.
Yazd. Yazd. Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We're waiting for 3 minutes for everybody to gather in, and Rabbi Taff will make the introduction.
Hello, Rabbi.
Anyone?
Can you hear me? Hanan,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you.
Was that Rabbi Avi who was talking before?
Hi, Noor.
Hi, Rabbi.
Nice to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Boker Tov, Sabach el Khair. Welcome to this important conversation this morning between Rav Hanan Schlesinger and Noor Awad from the organization Roots Judur Shorashim. Thank you, Rav Hanan. Thank you, Noor, for being with us. To everyone who has taken the time out of their day to join us for this conversation, to our Sinai Temple Program Director, Amanda Harrison, for organizing this important conversation, to Roy Regev, our Director of Media and Communications. A year ago, it was about a year ago, I believe, I sat right here with Rav Hanan and Noor at Sinai Temple to begin to hear their stories. And I was moved beyond words. A lot has changed since that day. It's been 103 days since the brutal attack by Hamas on innocent civilians in Israel, and since the war in Gaza has started, with countless innocent civilians suffering on both sides. So the conversation today may even be more important than it was just a year ago. For those new to Roots Judur Shorashim, it's an organization committed to fostering understanding and cooperation between Jewish and Palestinian communities in the challenging context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Through various initiatives, Roots seeks to build bridges by facilitating dialogue, promoting shared values, encouraging mutual respect. The organization plays a crucial role in creating spaces where individuals from both sides can engage in open conversations and fostering the seeds of understanding, contributing to the pursuit of lasting peace in the region. So today we're honored To have with us Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger, an Orthodox rabbi and passionate Zionist, who underwent a profound transformation through his encounters with Palestinians and the Palestinian people starting in late 2013. Originally from New York, Rabbi Hanan immigrated to Israel at the age of 20, living in Alon Shvut for 40 years. Rabbi Schlesinger initially focused on teaching Jewish studies to young adults in Jerusalem, later served as the head of the community kollel in Dallas, Texas, and it was during his time in Dallas, approximately 17 years ago, he became involved in interfaith work, founding Faiths in Conversation for Jewish, Christian, Muslim theological dialogue. This experience inspired him to engage with Muslims and Christians back in the land of Israel and the Holy Land. His long-standing commitment to pluralism. Despite that long-standing commitment to pluralism, it wasn't until returning to Israel in 2013 that he actually met Palestinians, met them as equals, leading to meaningful connections. So in early 2014, he, along with Ali Abu Awad and Shaul Juleman, founded Roots Judur Shorashim. Hanan resides in Alon Shvut with his wife Ayala, who is originally from Yazd, Iran. They have 4 children, 11 grandchildren. In addition, it's my honor also to welcome Noor Awad. Noor's grandparents were refugees from Malcha in southern Jerusalem, 1948. Noor was born in Amman, Jordan in 1991, 2 years before the Oslo peace process. In 1995, Noor's family moved to Bethlehem, south of Jerusalem. In 2014, at the age of 23, Noor became a tour guide licensed by the Palestinian Ministry of Tourism. After meeting Rav Hanan Schlesinger and Ali Abu Awad, again, co-founders of Roots Shorashim Judur in 2016, Noor joined Roots. Currently at Roots, Noor organizes joint Palestinian-Israeli activities and speaks to visiting groups about his personal experiences living through the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a Palestinian. He has seen much tragedy and in such conditions is motivated to work toward political solution. Noor resides in Bethlehem today, where he guides English speakers on geopolitical tours of the region. We welcome you both, and we are so grateful that you are with us today. So, I will now turn it over to Rav Hanan to begin the conversation.
Thank you, Rabbi Taff. Hello, everyone. I've been a rabbi my whole life. And I want to say 3 things at the outset about myself. I'm a Jew, and I'm a Zionist, and I'm a settler. When I say I'm a Jew, I mean that I'm connected to 3,000 years of Jewish history. I mean that my identity is not just as an individual, as part of the collective. I feel that I'm a great-grandchild of Abram and Sarah, and I have this deep connection to Jews around the world who lived in all times, including in the present. And when I say that I'm a Zionist, I'm deeply connected to the Zionist dream. I am part of the Jewish national liberation movement. I was born in America, but at the age of 18, I made Aliyah through the Zionist movement. I came home after 2,000 years of exile, 2,000 years when the Jewish people have not been home. We've been in limbo. We've been scattered around the world, and I merited to come home. And the sense is really deeply that, to come home. And I said also that I'm a settler, meaning that I'm deeply connected not only to the part of the land of Israel, there's today the state of Israel, but I'm also connected to the part of the land of Israel that's not in the state of Israel. That's what we call beyond the Green Line, what's called the West Bank. I call it Judean Samaria because that term is what Jews have called the West Bank for 2,500 years, and it's indicative of the deep historical connection between the Jewish people and the land from the river to the sea, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. I live that story of the Jewish people. I've been in Israel now for almost 40 years, but until 10 years ago, I'd never met a Palestinian. I live in Alon Shvut, as was mentioned in the introduction, in Gush Etzion, south of Jerusalem. And the way life is structured in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, is that there's lots of Israeli Jews, there's even more Palestinian Arabs, but there's no connection between them. We know nothing about the other side. And I was invited 10 years ago to a gathering with my Palestinian quote-unquote neighbors, and it literally turned my life upside down. I'll tell about it in 1 minute, but I'll just say now that I realized that in a certain sense, I don't really know where I'm living, because I live my story, my Jewish story, my Zionist story, my settler story, but it turns out that my stories are only half of the truth. There's a whole nother world out there of reality right around me that I'd never seen for then 33 years of living in the land. And I began to realize that to live a good Jewish life, you cannot be blind to the people, to the identities, to the narratives around you, to the reality of the other side that's right there that you just don't see. I began to open my eyes and to wake up from my blindness, and it completely changed my life. So how did it go? What happened? Exactly 10 years ago, the end of January 2014, I decided to go to this gathering I was invited to. It's the afternoon. I think it was a Wednesday, perhaps a Thursday afternoon. I open the front door of my house. I begin to walk outside. My wife calls behind me, "Where are you going?" So I told her I'm going to meet Palestinians. And that's when all hell broke loose, because she said, "What are you talking about? Meet Palestinians, they'll kill you. You can't do that. It's dangerous." And I came back in the home and I approached my wife. I saw the absolute terror in her eyes. She begged me not to go. But I knew that I had to do this. It was really important to me. And I walked out the front door and I had a sense, you know what? Perhaps my wife is right. Perhaps they will kill me. I was really afraid. My heart was pounding. I didn't get in the car. I walked 23 minutes and I got to the place where I was supposed to be. And I saw there's something I'd never seen before, like a miracle. I saw 15 Israelis, some of them my neighbors, and 15 Palestinians doing the strangest thing. They were talking to each other. I'd never seen that before. It was disconcerting. It was strange. I saw this Palestinian woman who wasn't talking to anyone. I walked right up to her. We talked for a while, and then she introduced me to her son. She says his name is Yazin, and he's 17 years old. We shook hands, and I saw that Yazin is wearing a windbreaker, and on the jacket are 3 words in the English language: seeds of peace. Seeds of peace. I had no idea what seeds of peace is. I looked at the jacket, it has the word peace. I looked at the young man, he's a Palestinian. I said to myself, this can't be a Palestinian wearing a jacket that says peace. Perhaps he doesn't know what it means. Perhaps he found it, someone gave it to him. So half jokingly, I said, Yazin, what's this Seeds of Peace thing? And he told me that Seeds of Peace is the name of a summer camp in Maine, USA. It takes Israeli kids and Palestinians out of the conflict zone for a summer of recreation and reconciliation. He said he's spent the past summer in the camp. He met Israeli kids his age. They became good friends. He said now they're connected on Facebook. And he told me that he was so transformed by meeting an Israeli that he can talk to, that he can understand, that it changed his life. He said that now he wants to spend some of his life building bridges of peace between our two peoples. And I was undone by Yazin, a Palestinian who went to a summer camp with Israeli kids, who believes in peace. How could this be? Later, I met his father Jamal. Jamal told me how he was transformed years earlier when he met his first Israeli. He said beforehand he hated them, hated the Israelis, hated the Jews. He thought they were all soldiers just coming to do damage to the Palestinian people. And the first time he went to a gathering with Israelis, he said that an Israeli came up to him and shook his hand. He was so upset that afterwards he ran to the bathroom to wash the filth off his hand from touching a Jew, and he vowed never to come back to such a terrible place. But he was convinced by friends to come back. He and his wife became part of a group of Israelis and Palestinians. They went once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and he told me he gradually saw that the people on the other side, the Jews, the Israelis, they're human beings, and they can be partners for building a better, more just future for the both sides. And he became a peace activist. I couldn't believe it. What's going on here? A Palestinian peace activist? And I met others that day. I heard Ali Abu Awad, who introduced himself and said, thank you all for coming to my family's land and coming to this gathering. He said that he grew up in Beit Umar, the same place Jamal grew up. And he said that during the first Intifada, the first Palestinian uprising, he threw rocks at Israeli tanks and was thrown into Israeli jail for 10 years. 10 years. He said during that time, His mother was also in jail, and he couldn't meet his mother. He said he went on a hunger strike for 17 days to demand to see his mother, and he was granted permission that the Israelis gave in to his hunger strike, and he said he learned the power of nonviolence. He began reading Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Mandela. He came out of jail as a peace activist, and he became involved in bringing the two sides together. I heard all these things. I was undone. I went home, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I realized that I have to figure this out. These Palestinians, they could be partners. They say they belong in this land just like us. Is that true? I went back to the same place I first met Ali and Jamal at that gathering. We were 3 Israelis and 3 Palestinians, then we're 5 and 5 and 10 and 10, and gradually we began to create something. We created Roots, the Israeli-Palestinian grassroots initiative for understanding nonviolence and transformation. And the piece of land where we first met, which belongs to the Abu Awad family, we created there the Dignity Center, the only joint Israeli-Palestinian community center in the whole West Bank. And for the past 10 years, we've been bringing the two sides together, local Israelis meeting local Palestinians in photography workshops and interfaith dialogue, in the youth group, in the women's group, in the summer camp, in the monthly political lectures, learning about his identity, the other's history. I want to try to briefly explain what I learned and what we learned. We, meaning Israelis and Palestinians. We began to see that both sides go to sleep at night dreaming the other side will disappear. Because both sides are certain the other side doesn't belong in this land. It's ours and not theirs. But after you hear the other side saying again and again and again their history in the land, their connection to the land, their literature, their agriculture, their deep, deep stories of connection, you realize no one's going anywhere. We're both here to stay. The Palestinians are not going to disappear. The Israeli Jews are not going to disappear. And it boggles your mind because you realize you've been basing your identity and basing your aspirations and your activities, your life, your behavior on an illusion that the other side will eventually disappear and we'll be here without them. Israelis think that, Palestinians think that. But when you come to the realization both sides are here to stay, you have to rethink reality, rethink your behavior, rethink your aspirations for the future. We began to understand that both Israelis and Palestinians build their identities upon the nullification of the other side's identity. The Israelis say there's no such thing as Palestinian, you're just an Arab, so go back to Saudi Arabia where you came from. And the Palestinians say, Jew, it's just a religion, it's not a people, it's not a nation, you don't need land, so go back to Russia where you came from. Both sides think they can tell the other side who they are. But we began to realize, both Israelis and Palestinians, you can never tell the other side who they are because you don't know. What you have to do is listen. You have to listen until it hurts when they tell you who they are. And if you listen enough, they will then listen when you tell who you are. And we learned. And it was very hard to learn. This was hard to listen because it contradicts so many things that are deeply entrenched beliefs on both sides. We began to understand that there's such a thing as the Palestinian people, and the Palestinians began to understand there's such a thing as the Jewish people. And we began to understand that us Israelis, the Palestinians, belong in the land of Palestine. And the Palestinians began to understand that the Jews belong in the land of Israel. What we understood is the land has two identities, has two names. Mother land of Israel has two sons, two children, the Palestinian people and the Israeli people. In different senses, we're both peoples, and in different senses, we're both connected to the land. Neither side is going anywhere. And we began to see that the key to making peace is recognizing the other side's identity, recognizing that they are who they know themselves to be, Israelis and Palestinians. We cannot deny each side's identity and connection to the land. We have to recognize who they are. And we have to accept the depths of their identity, their religious, historical connection to the land. That's the foundation of the work of Roots. that the whole land historically is the land of Israel from the river to the sea, the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, and at the same time, that whole same land is also the historical land of Palestine. We're both connected, we both belong. And in all the activities of Roots bring the two sides together, we try to create this deep recognition. We tell who we are, we Jews, and we let the Palestinians tell who they are. And then we have to grapple with the fact that there's two truths, there's two peoples. You have to find a way to fit two truths into one heart, two truths into one heart. That's in a nutshell. And then came October 7th, the massacre, the attack, the pain, the trauma, the indignation, the fear, the anger, the mourning, the sense of vulnerability. And after that came Israel's attack upon Hamas in Gaza, the effort to bring back the hostages, the effort to defang Hamas so that they won't be able to attack us ever again. And in that reality of massacre and counterattack, of people being lost on both sides, of wounded, it became more and more difficult for the two sides to talk in many peace organizations and also in Roots. Not only was it difficult psychologically, emotionally, to look at the other side, to be in the same room with them, but physically speaking, since October 7th until this present day, all of the Palestinians in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria are under military lockdown. With great difficulty, only with great difficulty can they leave their villages and towns and cities. There's almost no travel between Palestinian cities. There's very little commerce. Hundreds of thousands are not working. And for us, the point here is that we cannot meet because Palestinians cannot come to our Dignity Center. So we've had to meet on Zoom when we're able to meet at all, when the emotions allow us. And I want to try to explain what each side is thinking. Some Israelis in the peace camp say that since October 7th, a veil has been removed from our eyes. We've lost our nativity. We've sobered up. We see the absolute evil on the other side. We're disillusioned. We can no longer forgive or excuse or ignore the murderous ideology that supports violence, the ideology that's adopted by so many Palestinians. There's no partner on the other side. And some in the peace camp on the Palestinian side are saying that the almost wall-to-wall Israeli support for the relentless aerial bombing and then the ground attack of Israel against Hamas have shown that Israel is an inherently violent society that's founded upon raw power. Israelis don't understand the most basic things of what it means to work for peace. Their identity is founded upon force and violence. These Palestinian peace activists, and a lot of them say we're disillusioned. There's no partner on the other side. And I want to flesh out a little bit some of the things that I telegraphed right now. What are Israeli peace activists, many of them saying? They say, look at the Gazans who worked in towns and kibbutzim in the Gaza envelope. They were given jobs and support, and then they went and provided inside intelligence to Hamas that allowed the latter to massacre our people with murderous accuracy. How can we ever trust Palestinians again, even our Palestinian partners? And Israeli peace activists are also saying, look at the surveys that show the overwhelming support for Hamas in the territories. How can we make peace with these people? And Israelis, including peace activists, are saying Hamas is an Islamic organization. It's based on the Quran and the interpretive tradition. It's based on the Muslim Brotherhood. These are the same people that committed the inhumane barbarism in 1929, when in the name of the greatness of God, they hacked to death 70 Jews in Hebron and many others in Jerusalem and Sfat. And many things like that have happened since then. Islam has again and again showed itself to be a depraved religion, an evil religion. How can we make peace with people who follow Islam? And other Israeli peace activists, sometimes the same ones, are saying, look at our Palestinian peace partners who cannot condemn the massacre without explaining the context of occupation in which it occurred. Israelis say explaining it, giving it context, is tantamount to justifying it. How can we be partners with these people? And other Israeli peace activists, sometimes the same ones, are looking at the Palestinian peace activists who call for a ceasefire. And they say that means effectively calling for a ceasefire is saying Hamas can live to fight another day, which means that Israelis and Palestinians will continue to suffer from their anti-Semitic ideology and their bloodthirsty cruelty. There's no hope. How can we work with people calling for a ceasefire? And then I want to tell you that with just as much disappointment and frustration and despair, Palestinian peace activists say, look at our Israeli counterparts. They demand that we condemn the massacre of October 7th with no mention of the occupation, no mention of the siege, no mention of the daily attacks of the Israeli army upon Jenin and Dahisha and Nablus and so many other Palestinian areas. The Israeli peace activists, so to say the Palestinians, demand that we condemn the massacre with no mention of the cruelty of the Israeli soldiers toward us every day. The Israeli peace activists, so say the Palestinians, they don't see the context. Of course Hamas did something terrible, something horrible. Of course we Palestinian peace activists condemn the massacre, but the attack had a context. It didn't come out of nowhere. Don't the Israelis understand the injustice of the occupation, its brutality? Don't they understand that inevitably leads to such things as were committed on October 7th? And Palestinian peace activists also say, look at the massacre. That's the word they use, that Israel's perpetrating upon our brothers and sisters in Gaza. 22,000 people killed, most of them women and children. Our Israeli peace activists, our partners, so say the Palestinian peace activists, they say they're sorry for the loss of life. But the Israelis nevertheless continue to support the atrocities. What hypocrisy, the Palestinians say. The Israelis demand that we condemn the massacre of October 7th, and we most certainly do, but they themselves cannot condemn the massacre that their government is committing against us. Peace means opposition to violence. Don't they get it? Don't the Israeli peace activists get it? There's more that I can tell you that the Palestinians are saying. They're looking at the surging settler violence, my neighbors who are destroying Palestinian Palestinian property, who are doing damage to Palestinian livelihood, who are attacking Palestinians. And the Palestinians say, those are your co-religionists. You peace activists, you Israelis, why don't you do something about it? I want to try and say briefly how Roots looks at all this, how we're nevertheless managing to keep the two sides talking to each other over the past 3 months. We say, and I deeply, deeply believe this, that both sides, Israelis and Palestinians, are driving the other side further and further away from cooperation and reconciliation, further into the hands of the extremists, further into the depths of despair and intergenerational trauma. And even some peace activists are unable to say and do the most minimal things that the peace activist partners on the other side need them to say and to do. I believe that we need to have the same compassion and the same empathy that we held towards the other side before the war. We have to have the same empathy and compassion during the war. I believe that peace-loving people on both sides needed this time to be forgiving and accepting of their partners and the peace-loving non-combatants on the other side, now even more than before. This is not the time to set preconditions for our joint work. This is not the time for demands from the other side. We have to understand that just like we are deep in our emotional trauma, in our mourning, in our anger, so are the people on the other side. Just like we are saying things and feeling things that are not completely rational, so are they. We have to be able to find room to hold it. We have to forgive what people are thinking and feeling. And we have to internalize the difference between explanation and justification. We must let the other side explain themselves, and we must listen to their explanations. We must see context and accept how our actions are partially the cause of their actions. At the same time, to understand and even to take responsibility is not the same thing as justification. To accept the other side's explanations, their context is not the same thing as to justify what they do on either side. We are all the same people that we were before the war. We have not changed. We're the same people that worked with the other side, empathize with the other side, partnered with the other side. Each side is now within a pressure cooker of death and destruction and primitive tribal emotions. We have to understand that, and to cut the other side as much slack as we cut for ourselves. This is the message of Roots to our activists. Both sides are now engulfed by our separate national tragedies. We're not thinking or reacting rationally. We've been wounded and hurt, and we all know that wounded people wound people. We have to work to help the peacemakers heal. That is the message of Roots. Our frustrations with our partners on the other side are not really focused on them. Our frustrations are really with the other side's society. But we already knew before the war that the societies on both sides are not for peace. We already knew that before the war that the vast majority on both sides are full of prejudice and fear and ignorance and hostility towards the other side. We already knew that we who are working for peace are swimming against the current, working against the grain. So we have to continue where we left off, bringing the two sides together and helping them to heal. This is the meaning of Roots. I think that both sides in the peace camp, both sides within Roots have discovered how weak their partners on the other side are, how weak they are in relationship to the societies that they're part of, and how difficult it is for those partners to continue on the path of peace while their respective societies are moving so fast and so far in the other direction. But didn't we know already that the partners for peace, for real peace, for accepting the other side, for recognizing other sides on both sides are weak? Didn't we already say again and again and again for the past 10 years, if your partner for peace is weak, then go forth and strengthen him? The message of Roots is to strengthen your partner. We need strong Palestinian leaders, and we need Israelis to help them become leaders. We need strong Israeli leaders. We need Palestinians to help them become strong leaders for peace and recognition. I'll just say a few more words. I'll just end my presentation before Noor speaks with some of the fundamental principles. 1, neither side is going anywhere. Both sides must accept that the other side is here to stay. Number 2, both sides must recognize the other side's identity, the other side's peoplehood, and the other side belonging to the whole land. Both sides have legitimate and glorious story in this holy land. 3, both sides must admit to their misdeeds and to the suffering they have caused and are causing to the other side. Both sides must take responsibility. No more wallowing in victimhood. Number 4, we must develop empathy and compassion for both sides, as hard as that is. We must see the humanity on both sides. And lastly, Roots does this work, the work of these principles, through people-to-people meetings, neighbors meeting neighbors in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. For us, that's the foundation of a future political settlement that will bring security and justice and peace and equality to both sides in this little sliver of land that we both call home. Thank you.
Before Noor speaks, I just want to invite those who are joining us today to ask questions using the Q&A button. And following Noor's presentation, we'll have a few moments where we'll be able to answer questions together with Rav Hanan and with Noor. Thank you, Rav Hanan. Noor, floor is yours. Thank you, Noor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Noor Awad, as was mentioned before, and I live in Bethlehem. I joined Roots about 7 years ago, and I will tell you a little bit about my background and how I joined this initiative. So I was actually born in Jordan. My parents lived for a while in Jordan. My family are originally from Jerusalem. Until 1948, all of my ancestors have lived in a small village southwest of Jerusalem called Malha. The village still exists until this day. And in 1948, my family and my extended family find themselves having to leave their homes and their village after the massacre in the nearby village of Deir Yassin. And since then, my extended family ended up in refugee camps in Jordan and in the West Bank. My parents were born here in Bethlehem, and they grew up in Bethlehem before 1967. And they lived under the Israeli occupation after 1967. Until the moment when my father decided to leave to Jordan. And so that's how I was born there. In 1995, during the Oslo peace process, my family decided to come back. They saw this as a chance that we will finally have peace in our homeland, in our country. And they were talking about that the occupation will end. So it was actually very tempting, or was a good chance for us to come back, for a new hope, for a new future. So this is when I came to live in Palestine. I was only 4 years old, to live in Bethlehem, here in the West Bank. And to be honest, at the beginning, I didn't feel like I came to encounter the conflict, even though I have stories about the conflict from as early as I can remember. Even the process to travel back from Jordan through the borders to the West Bank, where we have to be checked by the Israelis, I can tell stories about that. But actually, I started to open my eyes around the year 2000, just before the second Intifada started, with the tension and the violence. Before the year 2000, my father was able to travel to Jerusalem, to go to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is not really far away from where I live. It's only like 10 minutes by car. If I was able to drive to Jerusalem, I will be in the city of Jerusalem, 10 to 15 minutes. But today, that's like impossible to go to Jerusalem. So my father used to work before the second Intifada, and the situation started to deteriorate. And what we thought will be a peace process that will bring hope and solution, actually, it got us in a very complicated situation before the year 2000, and the second Intifada started as a result of the failure of that process. And I grew up in what we call a very violent chapter of this conflict, the second Intifada. So by 2014, I finished my studies. I went to college here in Bethlehem to become a tour guide. And I started to work as a tour guide in the West Bank mostly. I can guide anywhere I want in the country, like, for example, Israeli tour guides, mostly because of the restrictions on movement. I will not be allowed to work in Jerusalem. I will not be allowed to, for example, work in the Galilee, in the north, in the south, only in the West Bank area. And I started to guide tourists from 2014 and on in Bethlehem, Hebron, Nablus, Ramallah, Jericho. And so these tourists are a mix of people, or different groups of people. Some who are coming to, just to visit and learn about this region. Some are spending a vacation here. And some actually are more interested, of course, and there's like the classical religious tourism, the pilgrims, Christian pilgrims actually who come to the Holy Land. And after they visit Jerusalem, they come to Bethlehem, to the Church of Nativity. And I also met with the internationals who we are actually coming, and they have heard already the Israeli side and the Israeli perspective, and they are looking to hear and learn more about the Palestinian side. And so I find myself getting more involved with these types of groups. And in 2016, I was guiding such a group actually to Hebron. And that group was a group of students from the US, mostly political science students. And they are on this program where they will spend about 2 weeks in the region, learning about both the Israeli and the Palestinian side. And I'm taking them to Hebron, actually, to show them the city of Hebron and the situation there. So on the way to Hebron from Bethlehem, I will go and explain the situation. I will talk about what you see outside of Bethlehem once you leave, the checkpoints, the settlements that were built around Bethlehem, Area C, the Israeli military presence, the settlers, how that affects us, the reality of occupation we live every day. And we end up in Hebron, and there we talked more, and I showed them around in the old city, talking about the situation. We met with the locals there who told us about their experience. And at the end of that day, toward the end of it, actually, we had 2 meetings. One meeting was with a settler, with an Israeli settler who lives in Hebron. Now that for me was actually something really new. I mean, until that point in my life, I heard about settlers. I saw settlers on the side of the road, guarded by soldiers. I watched them driving on an Area C on the highway. But I had never, ever in my life thought that I will talk to any of them. We don't speak the same language. We feel intimidated by the settlers, who are sometimes armed and sometimes actually committing acts of violence against us, all the time surrounded by soldiers. There's no way, there's no chance for me. I wouldn't even imagine that I would actually talk to a settler. And the only interactions that I had with Israelis, I realized that was with Israeli soldiers. I never, ever talked to just a regular Israeli citizen, just a normal human being. The Israeli to me until that point in my life, where I was like 25 years old, was only a soldier in a uniform with a gun that I have to meet at the checkpoint and I have to deal with carefully. So we had to meet with this settler because the group was really interested to hear from all sides and from to hear different perspectives. And after having a trouble to find a place where we can actually meet and sit together, because that's not something possible. There is no place where Israelis and Palestinians can just sit together in Hebron. And I had to go through, in a way, to smuggle myself through a checkpoint and go somewhere where I'm not allowed to go to, but the soldiers did not see me because I was with a group. So we sat there, and the settler basically started to give us a presentation about himself, about his story, and about what he's doing here as a settler and why there are settlers in Hebron. So he began explaining the situation. He actually told us at the beginning some of his story. I remember he said he came from the US. He was born in the US. He lived a good life there. And he chose to leave his life for one reason. That reason is he felt as a Jewish person, he can no longer live outside of the land of Israel. He needed to move to this land. He needed to move to this country and live here to fulfill his identity. So I immediately understood that I'm listening to the concept of Zionism. He's talking through a Zionist ideology, and it wasn't really surprising to me. I understand what he's saying, but I'm listening, and in my mind, I'm still listening to this American person, someone from America who decided, that he wants at some point to leave his life there and move to my country, to my land. And then he started to talk about his story and his people, and then the situation. And he described the situation with 2 points. Those 2 points are, he actually said, there is no such thing as occupation, and there is no Palestinian people. And in a way, it's similar to what Rabbi Hanan said, that I didn't realize that at that moment, but he based his identity upon those two beliefs, those two convictions, that there can't be other people beside the Jewish people, any legitimate people here. And the presence of the Jewish people here cannot be described in any way as an illegal or a wrong presence. So when he was denying the occupation, that was the first time ever in my life, ever, I heard someone who's even arguing the occupation or saying that there is no occupation. Because to me, this is a fact. It's a legal fact. Like, I live as a citizen of the Palestinian Authority, but at the same time, we live under Israeli martial law, and Israel is in control of the borders and airspace and everything. And of course, we live under Israeli occupation. Like, what do you mean there's no occupation? And I was like really shocked that someone even arguing or like denying that the occupation exists. I know we are not citizens of Israel. Israel is here from, at least, I mean, by here at the West Bank and Gaza since 1967, and we are not Israeli citizens. And the second thing he was talking about when he said there is no Palestinian nation, there is no Palestinian people, that actually I was more familiar with. It wasn't new to me. Because as a Palestinian, growing up, I've always learned that the sole purpose of the Zionist movement, it's not just the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, but also to deny that the Palestinian people exist. And so I said, of course, he will say something like this. And then, you know, the presentation at some point, he ended his presentation. Of course, there was questions from the students, and there was a lot of challenging questions. But I remember actually that I had a short conversation with him about something, and I felt very, very frustrated after that. Like, so frustrated that I said to myself, this person, this settler that I met, was actually the first Israeli who's not a soldier that I met with, and I think he's the last one. I mean that I decided and I thought at that moment that when I met this settler, this Israeli, he actually gave me a good example of how the people on the other side think, what they believe, what they base their identity on, and he affirmed every negative idea and every stereotype maybe I had about the other side. And I decided, okay, then I have no need to sit anymore with the enemy or meet anyone else. On the way back to Bethlehem, on the same day, I had to bring my group, this group, to roots, to Shorashim, Judur. Now, I didn't fully realize back then what roots actually is. I thought we are meeting another speaker, and he's an Israeli, and he's a settler, and we will hear from him. But then I asked, and I found out that there's a project there, and there are Palestinians involved. And when I asked what those Palestinians are doing with settlers, the person answered me. He said, you know, they are talking about peace. Now, for the first time, that sounded very, very dangerous. In my context, in my reality, that sounded really very suspicious. And I was really angry that there are Palestinians who are sitting with settlers talking about peace. So I wanted to go there to our center today that Rabbi Hanan mentioned, the Dignity Center, Karama. And I wasn't really interested to meet with or hear the Israeli side. I was like really looking forward to see the Palestinians who are there and maybe confront them. But that day, I didn't really met any Palestinian. I met with Rabbi Hanan. So he was actually the second Israeli I met in my life. And meeting with Rabbi Hanan and listening to his story that day was very unexpected. The way how he talked about his process, about his realizations and conclusions. Rabbi Hanan gave us a really long presentation talking about what brought him to roots, who he is, what's his roots, and why he is in this project, and his meetings with Ali and other Palestinians. And at the end, I was meeting with someone from the other side, someone who's an enemy, but someone who's also recognizing me. He's talking about the Nakba. He's talking about 1948. He's talking about the occupation, the reality of occupation. And I was a bit confused. How can he, or my group was also confused. How can he actually hold both things at the same time? Meaning you tell both sides of the story. You hold, it's not just both narratives, but also you are able to see the truth on both sides. You're not giving up on your identity and on your side, and you are able also to empathize with the other side. To be honest, actually, I didn't stay confused a lot after I met Hanan. It didn't take me, like, I didn't spend a long time confused, because I start to realize very quickly that I met a person on the other side who's able to have empathy and recognition to my side. And as he said toward the end of his presentation, that he and his partner, Ali, they have created this concept in where we have to fit two truths in one heart. And he's actually living it. He's actually, he believes in it. And so I start to think again and again about what he said. And of course, I came back and I had many conversations with Rabbi Hanan and Shaul and others, and Khalid, and then I decided to join Roots. Now, many people, when I tell about Roots in our community, or even in the peace building community here in Israel and Palestine, their reaction to it is usually negative. The people think that immediately they might think that the point of Roots, since we are Palestinians talking to settlers, is that we are there just to justify the settlers' narrative. And we are there just to give legitimacy to the settlers' voice or to the settlements and say they are not an issue. Or we are just trying to create some coexistence with Israelis who are living near us here in the West Bank. And I don't think this is what we are working on. Roots, in my opinion, have dealt with a very important problem, a very important issue, one of the most, I think, difficult obstacles toward peace in Israel and Palestine. And that obstacle was not really addressed, and there was no solution to it during the Oslo peace process. Because we are not just talking about a political agreement between two governments. We are not just talking about signing a contract. We are talking about two nations. The two nations feel very connected to the same land, to the entire land. They have their history, their connection, their identity is based on. And when it comes to dividing the land in a two-state solution, people feel the concession they have to make, they have to give up on part of their identity. And to the other side, that, as we kind of mentioned in our stories, that have no legitimacy to be here. They have no real connection to this land. They have no, we based our identities on denying the other side. So Roots is saying that one of the major obstacles in front of peace is the lack of reconciliation and the lack of recognition. It's not enough to get politicians to sign an agreement. It's a first step, it's a great step, it has to happen, it must happen, but we also need to work on the people level, and we have to work on the level of reconciliation. Now, I found this to be actually very true and very interesting to me, and I joined because of that. But I will still say that, and especially today, after the 7th of October, is that the work on the political level is more and much more needed, more than ever. So before the 7th of October, we were working, and we knew at Roots that this is actually this mission, the mission of reconciliation, will really take a long time. And we have to work with the existing circumstances and the situation. Even though it's not ideal, it's not it's not the right circumstances, but we have to work within the situation and try to change it. And I will say that a lot of things happened after the 7th of October. Rabbi Hanan talked, for example, about the two sides at Roots and other peace organizations, by the way, and the challenges that we faced. But we definitely today must have also the work on the political level at the same time, not just on the grassroots level, but also on the political level at the same time. Now, to me as a Palestinian, before the 7th of October, I kind of lived with this feeling. I didn't normalize it, but I lived with this feeling that this is an ongoing conflict, and it's an open wound. I don't remember a day in the last 7 years at Roots where I didn't felt like we are being attacked. I mean, something always happened. A week before the 7th of October, I was in Jerusalem, and I saw with my own eyes the tension and the violence and the soldiers harassing people and at the checkpoints and these things. It wasn't like before the 7th of October, the life was like really peaceful here. I think this is a delusional, especially for me as a Palestinian, someone like thinks that before the 7th of October the situation was great. Of course, it was not great. The occupation was before the 7th of October, but after the 7th of October, of course, things got more complicated, and it got even more tragic. And I don't want to repeat the same things that Rabbi Hanan talked about, but I will say on the Palestinian side, definitely what's happening in Gaza now and what happened in Gaza for the last 3 months is very horrific. Nothing like that happened before in our conflict. We feel like this war is not a war to bring a security or a war on Hamas, as the Israelis claimed, or the Israeli government claimed from the beginning of it. It's a war against all of us, I mean, all of the Palestinian people. It's a war on our existence. The conditions that have been created in Gaza were created to drive the population of Gaza out, maybe to Egypt, to Sinai. Also here in the West Bank, we have always this constant fear of existential fear that the settlements are expanding and our existence here is threatened. And definitely, with no question, the war brought on both sides, it triggered the traumas. This existential fear, I've learned in my work at Roots, exists on both sides. And even though I think I have the awareness and I can at some point, control my fears. I don't think. I think in the first few weeks, I also felt the same, and I still feel strongly that Palestinian presence is really threatened, seriously threatened. It's not a joke. I can't imagine. I live in the West Bank, and I can't imagine myself living in Gaza in this situation that exists right now. Thousands of people have been killed. The numbers are today even more than 22,000. It's close to 25,000 now, the confirmed numbers of people who were killed in the war. And of course, we have the issue of media. How media actually on the Israeli side and how media on the Palestinian side is telling the story. And also on the world side, there is a lot to talk about that. I have my own beliefs. I think that on the Israeli side, there is a certain, I believe there is propaganda on both sides, but I believe on the Israeli side, not all of the truth is being told to the public about the casualties and about the horrific humanitarian situation in Gaza. And I had really a very difficult conversations with other Israeli friends. And at the same time, I had actually good conversations with partners inside Roots and outside of Roots and other organizations, people who realize how bad the situation is and how much responsibility we have now, and that this is for us a historical moment as peace activists to try to do something to push forward. So I've been trying to get involved in other, let's say, initiatives that focus on a political vision, on political solutions. And we have, so far, we have like great discussions and some really good meetings. I feel like I'm trying to do whatever I can to try to change the reality, which is not, it's not easy at all. And Rabbi Hanan had said several times in trying to explain the situation that the peace activists found themselves in about the weakness of peace activists. And I agree with him. Yes, our situation is vulnerable. We are weak. In this time of violence, where the societies get radicalized, our voices are not, of course, being listened to, and it's very hard to even practice any sort of self-criticism. If you start to criticize your own side, then it's like us and them. People will not be able to listen to you. But at the same time, I do feel a little bit empowered because of this activism that I am doing with Roots and with other organizations to try to do something to change the situation. For example, like we have this initiative. It's a political initiative. It's called Land for All, 2 states, 1 homeland. It's a model of a confederation between 2 states that's trying to be a good alternative for the classic 2-state solution and for the complete separation paradigm. So I'm active with them, and I also joined their meetings. And last week there was like we were talking with Joseph Borrell from the European Union and with the people in the French government and in the Spanish government and also people here in the Palestinian Authority. So there is some activism going on right now, but we need more empowerment. I think people in the peace camp need more empowerment, and we have to be ready to face the situation. It's just one last thing I will say about the situation we live here in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is luckily maybe one of the, I will say, the violence here is not as bad as in other places in the West Bank. If the West Bank violence is like you have Israeli military invasions in Jenin and Tulkarem, Qalqilia every night. Nablus, like last night, people are being killed in Hebron. Here in Bethlehem, actually, the city is besieged by Israeli army. As Rabbi Hanan mentioned, we cannot travel without, like, we cannot really get out of Bethlehem easy. And there are soldiers who are closing the checkpoints. And even when they open the road, people actually are thinking twice before they leave because they are afraid what settlers on the road might do to them or what soldiers might do to them. So this is the situation that we have lived now for the last 3 months. So thank you for listening. And I think we will have the questions now.
Thank you. Thank you, Noor. Thank you, Rabbi Hanan, for your words, your presentation, the stories that you shared today. We will open. It is getting late, and we barely scratched the surface today. And our hope is that this is just the beginning of the conversation together. And we'll take a moment. We want to be respectful of your time, Noor and Rabbi Hanan, and of course of everyone joining us. And so we'll ask. There are a number of questions, and please, I apologize to all those who ask questions that we're not going to be able to get to all of them. But again, the hope is that we'll answer them in the future together. I just wanted to ask one of the questions. First of all, there's a lot of appreciation that has come in to both of you for this conversation, for your vulnerability. And for your openness and willingness to be in conversation and to be with us today. One question came in for you, Noor, about specifically with regard to have Palestinians given up on nonviolent protest? And the person joining us asking, why does it seem that violence is the chosen path?
That's a very good question. So I will say for the last between 2005 until 2019, from the end of the Second Intifada until 2019, there was really on the Palestinian side, the experience was like this. The Palestinian leadership said and tried to convince the people that the way forward, the way to end the occupation, and the way for Palestinian independence and a statehood is through negotiations. And if we don't have negotiations with Israel, then diplomacy and diplomatic pressure on Israel will bring about a solution. And the problem is that the situation was deteriorating in those years. The Israeli, in the Palestinian eyes, the Israeli governments are getting more right-wing, and the Israelis are voting more right from 2014 to 2015, until we reach the moment in where in 2019 it felt after the Trump peace plan, the deal of the century, any hope for a Palestinian state is gone. It's faded away, and so for sure there are Palestinians who basically they believe that that nonviolent resistance did not succeed and did not bring anything, and they resort to violence as their last solution after losing hope. But this group, this voice, have always existed within the Palestinian community. It definitely increased because you cannot just see it with Hamas in Gaza. Of course, in the West Bank, we had last year the Lion's Den. The Lion's Den was not actually part of Hamas. It was members of different political groups and different parties and different groups who basically say that we as young people, as youth, we see the Palestinian security forces who are actually working with the Israeli government, who are collaborating with the Israeli military, who are stopping any attempt for resistance of the occupation in the West Bank, and that's why the occupation is actually still here, and that's why the settlers, so they resort to violence. So yeah, but I don't think that all of the Palestinian people give up on nonviolence. I think that we still have examples of nonviolent resistance that worked out and succeeded. I think that what we also do in Roots and in other organizations, when we do activism that challenges the reality, we are resisting together the reality. I think that's an example of nonviolent resistance. I think it's a good example of nonviolent resistance, and there are other examples. So no, I wouldn't say that the people gave up, but there are some people in my generation, unfortunately, because of the circumstances, they felt like only if they went to violence, that what will bring them, or even they felt also forced to go to violence in some cases.
Thank you, Noor. This will be the final question for today, and I think on both sides, trust has eroded. It's maybe on the Palestinian side for a long time, for many on the Israeli side, and especially after October 7th. So the question for both of you is how we begin to rebuild that trust.
I'll say very briefly, the way to rebuild trust is on two levels. There's the trust between individual Israelis and individual Palestinians, and there's trust between governments. On the individual level, and this is the work of Roots, building trust is about interaction. It's about hearing who the other person is, learning to overcome your stereotypes and your prejudices and your ignorance, and beginning to understand that we have here a human being in front of us with an identity very, very different than mine. And when you become close to someone and you understand them, you begin to cut them some slack and not just make demands all the time of them. And then you begin to see that, yes, this is someone that I can trust. Not always, of course, but many times. On the government level, there's no trust at all. And there has to be a process of what's called trust-building measures. But neither government is close to that now.
Yeah, I agree with Rabbi Hanan. The trust between people can be restored and rebuilt by interaction between people, not by separation. That's what it's not easy to actually have interaction right now and to go back to the work we are doing. So also that's one of the reasons why I'm also I'm trying to focus on the work of the political work and to discuss visions or a vision for everyone and something to discuss about the future. And if we are not discussing a political plan, like a specific political plan, at least we are talking about the principles, about security for everyone, about dignity and and about everyone having the freedom of religious worship and freedom of movement. So that's important. Yeah, that's how we build the trust between the governments and between the leadership. I mean, listen, I don't trust the current Israeli leadership. I didn't trust him before the 7th of October, and I don't trust him after the 7th of October. I think there must be a change of leadership on both sides. On the Israeli leadership, definitely, and on the Palestinian leadership, we have to have a better leadership and a new leadership. That's what I believe. With the current leadership, it's really very. It's not. I don't think we are able to change anything.
Thank you. We want to thank Noor and Rabbi Hanan for being with us today. Again, for sharing your story, for being open to continuing the dialogue. As I shared at the beginning of our time together, a year ago, we gathered here at Sinai and you shared your stories. And in those moments, I was really filled with a sense of hope that maybe peace was possible. And as we also shared, there's a lot that has changed in the last year. And to be honest, since October 7th, I had begun to lose a lot of that hope that I felt. But seeing and hearing you both today continue the dialogue, continue to recognize each other's humanity, greatly increased my sense that maybe peace is possible. To hold on to that hope that we can continue to see each other as brothers and sisters. Hanan, you said one thing about this idea of wounded people wound people. I think that was one thing that you mentioned, and I thought of this past weekend we celebrated and honored the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who believed, right, this idea that we're all creating the image of God, that we're all one, even though we may be from different backgrounds and different faiths. And our community came together and we sang the words, "We shall overcome." Deep in our hearts, I truly believe that we shall overcome one day. And I thought of Reverend Martin Luther King's words, right, that darkness, from your words, Rahan, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can. Hatred cannot drive out hate, only love can. And that is both fueled with that hate, or that hate is only fueling us, then there's no way forward, that we have to be willing to bring that love to each other to be able to drive out that hate. And so I think this for me, was a first step in kind of in healing and in trying to heal. Especially after October 7th, to come together and to think about how we can bring more love. And so when we sat together last year, I don't know if, we were sitting in a room that is called the Hall of Builders. And so my prayer is that today's dialogue be the first of many steps as we work together to build a brighter future for both our peoples. We're so grateful. Thank you so much. Toda rabba, shukran to you and for being with us. And I know Rav Hanan wanted the last word today.
One short thing and something else. The short thing is just our website. I want everyone to know our website, friendsofroots.net. Friendsofroots.net. And then to close with this, only peace will bring true security. Security is very, very important to us Israelis, bitachon. But only peace will bring true security. And we in Roots believe that there won't be peace until both sides get what they need, want, and deserve. We Israelis have to be ready to give the Palestinians what they need, want, and deserve, and the Palestinians have to be willing to give the Israelis what we need, want, and deserve. Only when both sides are satisfied that their minimum needs are met, then there will be peace. So we have to be pro-Israel and we have to be pro-Palestine at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. To be